The door slammed behind me with a resounding thud, the sound echoing through the empty house. "Jared, I'm home," I called out, kicking off my shoes and hanging up my coat. No response. Strange, I thought. His car was in the driveway. As I rounded the corner into the living room, the sight before me stopped me dead in my tracks. There on the couch was my husband locked in a passionate embrace with my sister-in-law, Miranda. Time seemed to freeze as a torrent of emotions flooded through me. Shock, betrayal, rage. What the hell is going on here? I shouted, my voice trembling. Jared and Miranda broke apart, their faces flushed with guilt and panic. "Callie, it's not what it looks like," Jared stammered, scrambling to his feet. "Not what it looks like." I spat back, my hands balling into fists. "You were all over my sister, Jared. How could you do this to me?" Miranda stood up, adjusting her disheveled clothing. "Calm down, Callie," she said coolly. "It was just a little harmless fun." The audacity of her words made my blood boil. "Harmless fun? You're supposed to be my family!" "What's all this racket?" Marlene's shrill voice cut through the air as she emerged from the kitchen, her eyes narrowing at the scene before her. "Your son and daughter have been carrying on an affair behind my back," I spat, glaring at the two of them. Marlene scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. This family doesn't need your overreactions." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother-in-law was defending their betrayal. "Are you serious right now, Marlene? How can you be okay with this?" "Enough," Jared shouted, his face flushed with anger. "You're blowing this way out of proportion, Callie. It was just a stupid mistake." "A mistake?" The weight of his words hit me like a ton of bricks. I looked around at the three of them, my so-called family, and felt a profound sense of isolation wash over me. In that moment, I realized that, no matter what I said or did, they would never take my side. I was alone in this. Tears stung my eyes as I fought to maintain my composure. "You know what? I'm done," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and determination. "I'm done with all of you and your lies." Without another word, I turned and stormed out of the living room, grabbing my coat and keys on the way out. As I flung open the front door, I heard Marlene's voice call out behind me. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back." But as I stepped out into the cool night air, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us. I had finally seen them for who they truly were, and there was no going back. I slammed the car door shut and peeled out of the driveway, tears streaming down my face. How could this be happening? Just a few years ago, Jared and I were so happy, so in love. We had dreams of starting a family, growing old together in a little house with a white picket fence. That future now seemed like a cruel mirage. I thought back to the day we first met at the hospital cafeteria. I was a young nurse, and he was a charming medical student doing his rounds. He flashed that dazzling smile and struck up a conversation, and I was instantly smitten. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared passion for helping others and our desire for a simple, peaceful life together. Those early years were blissful. Jared was attentive, caring, and always put me first. But as time went on, cracks began to show. His spending habits spiraled out of control, and he racked up debt faster than I could keep track of. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always brushed it off, promising he had it under control. Then there was Miranda. From the moment I met her, I sensed something off about her. She was always a little too friendly with Jared, a little too touchy-feely, but I pushed those thoughts aside, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. When Jared suggested we move in with his mother to ease our financial burden, I was hesitant, but he assured me it would only be temporary, and I reluctantly agreed. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a web of lies and manipulation. Marlene's house was like a prison, with unspoken rules and a suffocating atmosphere of hostility. She and Miranda treated me like an outsider, constantly belittling me and undermining my authority. Jared, spineless as ever, did nothing to defend me, too busy seeking his mother's approval. While I worked long shifts at the hospital, trying to keep us afloat, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, disrupting my routine and making it impossible for me to find any sense of peace or order. And Jared? He was too busy burying his head in the sand, ignoring the mounting tensions and the growing rift in our marriage. I tried to talk to him to make him see what was happening, but he refused to listen. He was so desperate for his mother's love and approval that he was willing to sacrifice our relationship for it. As I drove aimlessly through the night, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts and emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal, they all swirled together in a toxic cocktail. But beneath it all, I felt a glimmer of something else. Determination. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I wouldn't let them break me. I was stronger than that, stronger than they could ever imagine. After that fateful night, I found myself thrust into a new reality, one where the walls of Marlene's house felt like they were closing in on me. The air was thick with unspoken rules and covert hostility, and I struggled to find my footing in this oppressive atmosphere. Marlene and Miranda made it clear from the start that I was an outsider in their domain. They would exchange pointed looks and whispered comments whenever I entered a room, their eyes boring into me with a mixture of disdain and contempt. "Honestly, Callie, must you leave such a mess everywhere you go?" Marlene would sneer, gesturing to the perfectly tidy living room. Miranda would chime in with a smirk. "I don't know how you manage to make such a pigsty out of everything." Their words were like daggers, chipping away at my self-worth bit by bit. And Jared? He remained silent, too spineless to stand up for me against his mother's constant belittling. While I worked long, grueling shifts at the hospital, trying to make ends meet, Marlene and Miranda lounged around the house, idle and resentful of my absence. They would deliberately create chaos and disarray, leaving messes for me to clean up when I returned home, exhausted and drained. "Callie, darling, you really should learn to keep a tighter ship around here," Marlene would tut, her eyes glinting with malice. It was a twisted game of control, and they were determined to make me the loser. Jared's dependency on his mother's approval became more apparent with each passing day. He would cower and capitulate to her every whim, too afraid to risk her disapproval. Our marriage, once a source of joy and strength, had become a battleground, and I was fighting a losing war. "Jared, please, can't you see what they're doing?" I pleaded with him one night, tears streaming down my face. "They're tearing us apart, piece by piece." But he just shook his head, his eyes downcast. "You're overreacting, Callie. They're family. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. Hadn't they already shattered that sacred bond with their betrayal? As the days turned into weeks, the weight of their constant belittling and manipulation began to take its toll. I found myself withdrawing, retreating into the sanctuary of my work, where at least I could find a brief respite from the chaos. It was there, in the halls of the hospital, that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. As the weeks dragged on, Marlene and Miranda's manipulative games intensified. It was as if they took perverse pleasure in tightening their control over me, squeezing the last vestiges of self-worth from my soul. "Callie, darling, did you really think that outfit was appropriate for work?" Marlene would sneer, her eyes raking over me with disdain. "You're a nurse, not a streetwalker." Miranda would chime in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, leave something to the imagination, won't you?" Their words were like knives, cutting deep into my already fragile psyche. I would retreat into myself, trying to tune out their constant barrage of insults and belittling comments. But it wasn't just their words that tormented me. Miranda took a particular delight in disrupting my work life, creating chaos and disarray at home that would bleed into my professional responsibilities. She would deliberately leave messes around the house, knowing I would have to rush to clean them up before my shift. Or she would accidentally misplace my scrubs or work bag, forcing me to scramble to find them before I was late. "Oops, sorry, Callie," she would say with a sickly sweet smile. "I must have misplaced your things again. You really should be more organized." It was a twisted game, and I was the unwitting pawn. Through it all, Jared remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. "Jared, please," I would beg him, tears streaming down my face. "Can't you see what they're doing to me? To us?" But he would just shake his head, his eyes downcast. "They're family, Callie. We have to stick together." Stick together? The irony of his words was almost too much to bear. It was during those dark days that I found solace in my work at the hospital. There, I could escape the suffocating atmosphere of Marlene's house and find a brief respite from the constant barrage of abuse. And it was there that I met Lucas, a kind-hearted man whose son was one of my patients. We struck up a friendship almost immediately, bonding over our shared love of literature and our desire to find peace in this chaotic world. With Lucas, I didn't have to put on a brave face or pretend everything was okay. He saw through the cracks in my armor and offered a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. His empathy and support were like a lifeline, reminding me that there was still goodness in the world, even amidst the darkness I was enduring. As our connection deepened, I began to question the life I had resigned myself to. Was this really all I deserved? To be belittled and disrespected by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me? A spark of defiance began to flicker within me, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been trapped in their web of lies and manipulation, but I refused to let them break me. Not this time. With Lucas's encouragement, I started to stand up for myself, pushing back against Marlene and Miranda's constant barrage of insults and mind games. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "You know what, Marlene?" I said one day, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm done letting you and Miranda treat me like garbage. I deserve better than this." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me, but before she could respond, I turned and walked away, my head held high. It was a small victory, but it was the first step on a long road to reclaiming my self-worth and my life. As the weeks passed, the tension in the house grew thicker, like a suffocating blanket weighing down on me. Marlene and Miranda's barbs became sharper, their insults more cutting, as if they could sense my newfound defiance and were determined to snuff it out. "Look at you, Callie, acting all high and mighty," Marlene sneered one evening as I returned from a long shift at the hospital. "Don't forget your place in this household." Miranda chimed in with a cruel laugh. "Yeah, Callie, you're nothing but a burden to us all. You should be grateful we even let you stay here." Their words stung, but I refused to let them see how much they affected me. I held my head high and walked past them, my jaw clenched in determination. But Jared, as always, remained silent, too cowardly to stand up to his mother and sister. He would watch as they tore me down, piece by piece, too afraid of losing their approval to intervene. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. As Marlene and Miranda launched into yet another tirade, berating me for some perceived slight, something inside me snapped. "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my fist down on the kitchen table. "I'm done with this constant abuse, this never-ending barrage of insults and belittling." Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly unaccustomed to such defiance from me. "How dare you speak to me like that in my own house?" she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "Your house?" I spat back, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and newfound courage. "This was supposed to be my home too, Marlene, but you and Miranda have made it a living hell for me." Miranda scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Callie. We're just trying to help you fit in with this family." "Fit in?" I laughed bitterly. "You've made it abundantly clear that I'll never be a part of this family. Not really." Jared, who had been sitting silently in the corner, finally spoke up. "Callie, please, let's not make a scene." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing with fury. "A scene? Is that all you care about, Jared? Keeping up appearances while your own family tears me apart?" He flinched, shrinking back from the intensity of my gaze. I just think we should all try to get along, he mumbled weakly. Get along? I shook my head in disbelief. How can I get along with people who have made it their mission to destroy me? To strip away every last shred of my self-worth and dignity? Marlene stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. Watch your tone, young lady. You're the one who's brought nothing but drama and chaos into this family. Drama and chaos? I laughed bitterly. That's rich, coming from the woman who's been orchestrating this whole twisted game from the start. Miranda sneered. Game? Don't flatter yourself, Callie. You're not worth the effort. That was the final straw. I felt something inside me snap, a dam of pent-up frustration and anger finally bursting forth. You know what? I'm done, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I'm done with all of you and your lies, your manipulation, your constant need to tear me down. Marlene's eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting such defiance from me. You ungrateful little. But I didn't let her finish. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the kitchen, heading straight for the bedroom to pack my bags. Callie, wait, Jared called out, trailing behind me. Where are you going? I whirled around to face him, my eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. I'm leaving, Jared. I'm leaving this toxic household, and I'm leaving you. His face fell, a flicker of fear passing over his features. But where will you go? I shook my head, a sad smile tugging at my lips. Anywhere but here. Anywhere I can finally be free of this constant abuse, this never-ending cycle of manipulation and control. As I stuffed the last of my belongings into my suitcase, I heard Marlene's shrill voice echoing down the hallway. Don't be so dramatic, Callie. You'll be back, crawling and begging for our forgiveness. But as I stepped out into the cool night air, suitcase in hand, I knew in my heart that she was wrong. This was the end of the road for us, the final chapter in a story of betrayal and broken trust. I glanced back one last time at the house that had once been my home, a sense of finality settling over me. You won't break me, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. You'll regret losing me. And with that, I turned and walked away, my head held high, and my heart filled with a newfound sense of determination. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The night I left Marlene's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear, sadness, but also a profound sense of relief. As I drove away, the weight of years of emotional abuse and manipulation seemed to lift from my shoulders, replaced by a newfound determination to take control of my life. In the days that followed, I found a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the oppressive atmosphere of my former home. It was small and sparsely furnished, but to me it felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the constant weight of judgment and criticism bearing down on me. As I settled into my new life, I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding solace in the familiar routine and the knowledge that I was making a difference in people's lives. It was there that I reconnected with Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose support had been a lifeline during my darkest days. We would often grab coffee together during our breaks, and I found myself opening up to him in a way I hadn't with anyone else. He listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding that helped to heal the deep emotional wounds left by my failed marriage and the betrayal of my own family. "You're so strong, Callie," he would say, his eyes filled with a warmth and sincerity that I had almost forgotten existed. "What you've been through would have broken most people, but you've come out the other side, even more resilient." His words resonated deeply within me, reminding me of the inner strength that had carried me through so many challenges in my life. I may have been beaten down, but I refused to be broken. With Lucas's support, I began to rediscover the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. My love of reading, my passion for gardening, my appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had been neglected during the tumultuous years of my marriage. Slowly but surely, I felt myself coming back to life, like a flower blooming after a long, harsh winter. In my quieter moments, I would reflect on the emotional scars left by my ordeal, the deep cuts inflicted by the very people who were supposed to love and cherish me. But instead of wallowing in bitterness and resentment, I found solace in my own resilience, in the knowledge that I had emerged from that darkness stronger and more self-assured than ever before. "You know, Lucas," I said to him one day as we sat sipping our coffee in the hospital cafeteria, "I used to think that my life was defined by the people around me. My husband, my in-laws, the roles I played for them. But now I realize that my life is my own, and I'm the one who gets to write my story." He smiled, reaching across the table to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "And what a beautiful story it's going to be, Callie. You've already overcome so much, and the best is yet to come." As I looked into his kind eyes, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in far too long. It was the promise of new beginnings, of a future filled with possibility and hope. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace, secure in the knowledge that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the strength and resilience to face them head-on. The road to empowerment had been long and arduous, but I had emerged on the other side, stronger and more self-assured than ever before. It had been several months since I had walked out of Marlene's house, leaving behind the toxic web of lies and manipulation that had nearly broken me. In that time, I had worked hard to rebuild my life, embracing my newfound independence and rediscovering the parts of myself that I had lost along the way. So when my phone rang one afternoon and I saw Marlene's name flashing across the screen, I felt a surge of anger and resentment. How dare she try to worm her way back into my life after everything she had put me through? "What do you want, Marlene?" I answered, my voice clipped and cold. There was a pause on the other end of the line, as if she was taken aback by my icy tone. "Callie, dear, is that any way to speak to your mother-in-law?" I scoffed. "You lost the right to call yourself that the moment you betrayed me and took their side." Another pause, then a heavy sigh. "Callie, I need your help." Those words hung in the air, and for a moment, I was tempted to simply hang up the phone and be done with it. But a part of me, the part that still clung to the naive hope that she might actually show some remorse, made me hesitate. "What could you possibly need my help with?" I asked, my voice dripping with disdain. It's Jared and Miranda," she said, her voice trembling. "They've made a mess of things, and now we're in real trouble." I felt a flicker of satisfaction at the admission, but I pushed it aside. "And why should I care about your problems, Marlene? After the way you all treated me, why would I lift a finger to help you?" "Please, Callie," she pleaded, her usual haughty demeanor crumbling. "We're in over our heads here. Jared's financial mistakes, Miranda's reckless spending, it's all caught up to us, and we're drowning." I could hear the desperation in her voice, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice low and measured. "You're calling me, the same woman you belittled and abused for years, begging for help to clean up the mess you and your precious children have made." Silence on the other end of the line. "Well, let me tell you something, Marlene," I continued, my voice rising with each word. "You had your chance to treat me with respect, to stand by me as family should, but instead you chose to tear me down, to make me feel worthless and alone." I could hear her shallow breathing, but she didn't interrupt. "So you know what? You can take your problems and your pleas for help, and you can shove them. I'm done being your scapegoat, your punching bag. You made your bed, Marlene, and now you can lie in it." With that, I hung up the phone, a triumphant smile spreading across my face. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to Marlene and her manipulative games, and it felt incredible. As I basked in the afterglow of my newfound power, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The toxic ties that had once bound me to that family were finally severed, and I was free to move forward with my life, unburdened by their drama and dysfunction. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, I sat down and penned a heartfelt letter to Lucas, the man whose kindness and support had been a guiding light during my darkest days. I poured out my gratitude, thanking him for helping me find the strength to break free from the chains of my past and embrace the future with open arms. And as I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement at the thought of what that future might hold. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly alive, ready to embark on a new chapter, filled with possibility and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before, a true survivor who had faced down her demons and emerged victorious. In the months that followed my decisive break from Marlene and her toxic family, my life blossomed in ways I had never imagined possible. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, freeing me to embrace the world with open arms and an open heart. I threw myself into my work at the hospital, finding immense fulfillment in the simple act of caring for others. My colleagues remarked on the newfound confidence and radiance that seemed to emanate from me, a stark contrast to the broken, defeated woman I had been just a few months prior. As my self-assurance grew, I found myself becoming a mentor of sorts to the younger nurses on the floor. They would seek me out, drawn to the aura of resilience and strength that surrounded me, eager to learn from my experiences and the hard-won wisdom I had gained. "How did you find the courage to walk away from such a toxic situation?" one young nurse asked me one day, her eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. I smiled, reaching out to give her hand a gentle squeeze. It wasn't easy, believe me. There were moments when I thought the weight of it all would crush me. But deep down, I knew that I deserved better, that we all deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, no matter what. She nodded, hanging on my every word as I recounted the harrowing journey that had led me to this point, the betrayal, the emotional abuse, the ultimate decision to break free and reclaim my life. "You're so strong, Callie," she murmured, her voice tinged with awe. "I hope I can be half as brave as you someday." In those moments, I felt a profound sense of purpose wash over me. My story, the tale of my resilience in the face of adversity, had the power to inspire and empower others. It was a legacy far greater than I could have ever imagined. Outside of work, my life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. I reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had fallen by the wayside during the tumultuous years of my marriage. We would gather for dinners and movie nights, laughing and reminiscing about the carefree days of our youth. And then there was Lucas, the kind-hearted man whose unwavering support had been a guiding light during my darkest hours. Our friendship deepened, evolving into something more, a connection that transcended mere words, a bond forged in the fires of shared struggle and mutual understanding. As we spent more time together, I found myself opening up to him in ways I never thought possible, sharing the deepest corners of my heart and soul. And in his warm embrace, I found a sense of peace and acceptance that had eluded me for far too long. On quiet evenings, when the city was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I would gaze out over the skyline from the comfort of my modest apartment, marveling at the journey that had brought me to this point. The road had been long and arduous, paved with heartbreak and betrayal, but I had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. In those moments of quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for the trials that had tested my mettle, for the people who had lifted me up when I could no longer stand on my own, and for the indomitable spirit that had carried me through it all. As the city lights twinkled like a million tiny stars, I smiled to myself, secure in the knowledge that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was equipped to face them head-on. The path forward was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the broken, defeated woman who had walked out of Marlene's house all those months ago. I was a survivor, a warrior, a beacon of strength and resilience for all those who dared to dream of a better life. And as I gazed out over the vast expanse of possibility that stretched before me, I knew that the best was yet to come.